Hi everyone, this is Alish. I'd like to go over the program that I developed for my Python class. This program is basically a vending machine program that takes the input from the users using the graphical user interface. Once the users select any of these input, the program processes the data and gives the visual representation of the data. For this program to run, we need 4 of these files and few of the icons that we will be using as a button. These icons will get placed under the given location, so the location path can be updated as needed once the files are copied. Going over to the main program, we are using a TK enter library for the graphical user interface. So let me go ahead and run this program, that way I can explain the program UI along with the code. There we go. So this is the UI that being developed. So as a part of the TK, as part of the UI library, I'm giving the title as a vending machine, the geometry, I've specified the geometry, as well as created a label which pulls the latest today's date, which is basically a parameterized from this input variable. So let me go over this file first. So the input variable basically importing 2 library, the OS and the date time. The today's date get resolved to the readable format of today's date. Provides the some of the intermediate file that we are using, the price of the product, and few of the image name are located are stored on the variable. And these functions are basically a path of the file where the files are located, and few of the intermediate process we will be using, intermediate functions we will be using within the process. So the first once the labels are printed out, we are storing the image icon of all the image icon to a given variable, and creating 4 different frames: the selection frame, message frame, payment button frame, and the report button frame. So these 4 buttons that we are seeing are the selection frame. Selection frames are basically we are trying to pull the image and trying to display the icon. The message frames, it's going to be somewhere around over here. So let's say if we pull the price, so this are the message frame. The button frames are basically the payment and the cancel button, and the reporting frames is basically the reporting button. So once this from the selection bar on this section, if we click any of these button, what it does is it basically calls the payment function. So let me go ahead and click one of them. So as soon as I click the button of Coke, it shows the payment due of 50 cents. So now if I scroll all the way up, there is a payment function out here. So what it does is we have an input variable that needs to be passed. So Coke is labeled as 1, followed by the others with 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we pass the number, when we pass the parameters over here, it prints the label, the amount due, and what it does is it tries to store the variable in a temporary file. Stores the variable in a temporary file. Now if we end up purchasing the product, which are these 2 buttons, the cancel and the payment. So if the selection payment complete or the payment button is being clicked, it calls the payment complete function, which is basically a payment complete function out here. In that case, what it first do is it try to verify if there is a temporary file in a given location, which is a database file that we have mentioned, database file, which is stored on this path. So once we call the database file, it resolves the full path and verifies if the file is out there or not. If the file is out there, which means there was a selection being made. So in that case, a message of thank you for your payments is being displayed, followed by a data entry needs to be happen on the data on the backend process. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to open a temp file, trying to extract the value from the temp file, which is the selection, and passing that value to a data entry functions, which is under the data load. So under this data load, we are passing the value from the temp file. So depending upon what's the value in the temp file, it can be either 1, 2, 3, or 4. So 1 is considered as Coke, 2 is considered as Sprite, 3 is considered as Fanta, and the remaining 4 is as water. From our selection, we can clearly see that 1 is Coke, 2 is Sprite, Fanta, and water. So we are storing all these variables under the product name. So once we store the product name and know what item it is, we make sure if there is a file in a given location where we want to store the data. If the file is there, we are appending the value to the file. If the file is not present in the folder, what it does is it creates a new file and it adds the header detail followed by the value. Moving forward, and if in case when we go ahead and click payment again, what it does is the temporary file is being removed after the file has been loaded. So what it does is if you click the payment button, it tries to pop up a message saying that select a product. Now the cancel, which is a clear button, so if I go ahead and clear the cancel button, what it does is it tries to see if there is a temp file out there. If there is a temp file, we basically try to remove the temp file and display a message saying that select your product. So let's say, for example, if we select Coke, Sprite, and we go ahead and cancel, so in that case it simply says select a product. But if we go ahead and select a Sprite, make a payment, and does the cancel, it just asks for the select the product. So what it does is whenever we try to click the cancel, it goes and reset everything, meaning it removes the temp files, assuming that it's a fresh start. So now the next features that we have is the report button. So we did have a report button over here. So what it does is when we click the report button, it pops out the message, which is basically a report. It has two different buttons. So if we have a report, it pops out calls the pop-up function. Within the pop-up function, we have created the labels and view buttons. The two of the buttons we have is the daily sales. The daily sales buttons and the daily product sales report. So there are two different buttons. So depending upon which one we click, let's say for example we click daily sales report. So what it does is when we click the daily sales reports, it calls the daily sales function, which is under the report file. So it goes to the daily sales. What it does is on this daily sales we have loaded two different libraries, the Panda and the Matplotlib. So what it does is it reads the CSV file that we have created. It reads that file. And it tries to create a data from the given data frame. It tries to groups the data. It tries to summarize the data and then plots the data and plots the bar graph, which is basically a sales data and the product price. So for example, let's go ahead and plot this data out here. So in this case, let's go ahead and put the daily sales. It pops out a chart which has a daily sale. It pops out a daily sales amount chart where the x-axis are the dates and the y-axis are the sales amount. So this is where we calculated using the data frame, Panda data frame. And from there, the second, which is the product sales. If we end up clicking the product sales, what it does is it generates the product sales count report, where the x-axis has the product name and the y-axis has the product count. So for example, the Coke, out of the Coke, in the entire we have like close to 35 Coke sale or sold so far. Fanta, which is around close to 40 counts sale so far, and Sprite somewhere around 35, and water somewhere around 35. So these are the different counts displayed by two of these buttons. And at the very end we just closing the loop. So that's all I got for this part. Thank you.